In the previous video in the series on the ongoing GOP coup, I discussed how the ruling in Shelby versus Holder enabled a slew of new so-called voter ID laws. These so-called voter ID laws and the other non-ID provisions contained in them are not the only effects of Shelby. Shelby also enabled large-scale voter purges in states that previously were not able to do so because of the pre-clearance requirements that were now gone. In 2018, Georgia Secretary of State Brian Kemp, a Republican, was running for governor. He was challenged by Stacey Abrams, a Democrat. The office of the Secretary of State is charged with running elections and specifically to maintain the voter lists. In July of 2017, his office removed over 500,000 Georgians from the voter list because they had supposedly skipped one too many elections. Of those purged, 70,000 re-registered to vote. 65% of those people registered in the same county as they had previously been registered to vote in, i.e. they had not moved. Of those purged, more came from districts that ultimately voted to support Abrams than those that voted to support Kemp. Furthermore, 53,000 voter applications were put on hold by Kemp's office over an exact match policy that he had initially implemented as Secretary of State before it was law, and then that exact match policy was codified into law after the policy was successfully challenged in the courts. Voter purges continue to this day in Georgia. They happen in other states as well. Most recently, Ohio purged voters, and many on the list were incorrect, and according to the League of Women Voters, the number of Democrats purged outnumbered Republicans by a 2-to-1 margin. A conservative group in Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, or WILL for short, brought the suit stating that Wisconsin had not conducted voter purges as required by law. They seek to remove over 100,000 voters from the voting lists before the 2020 elections. A conservative group, Judicial Watch, has also sued the state of Pennsylvania to remove up to 800,000 voters in the state. Now, don't get me wrong, there is nothing wrong with the concept of making sure that voting lists are accurate. The problem comes with who gets targeted and if there is a disproportionate impact of those actions on minority voters. Remember the voter registrations held up by then Secretary of State Kemp in Georgia? 70% of those were from black voters, 80% of those were from minorities in general. And often the forms that are sent to verify addresses are done via mail that can't be forwarded. So the voter who is facing a purge, but who may have moved within their own district, might not even be aware of the purge. If removed voters cannot be reliably notified of their removal in time to re-register before the next election, these voters will have become disenfranchised. If voting is indeed a right, as is stated multiple times in the Constitution, shouldn't it be difficult to remove voters from the lists? Shouldn't checks be put in place to prevent unscrupulous secretaries of state from eliminating the voters of the opposition party? The Voting Rights Act, before it was gutted by an activist conservative court, sought to do just that. States that had proven themselves untrustworthy were prevented from wholesale changes to their voting laws, and now that the restrictions have been removed, these states have proven themselves untrustworthy yet again. It becomes much easier to retain your power in a coup if you're allowed to pick your voters, and so far we have seen that via gerrymandering, non-ID provisions in so-called voter ID laws, and voter purges, that the GOP has effectively been able to pick their voters and retain power despite being in the minority. Stay tuned for further segments of the GOP Coup video series. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and support the channel by contributing to the Patreon at patreon.com/liberaldan. Thank you and have a good day.